Okay, here's the Laney PA60 watts, which I've had on for a little while now, so it can stabilize. Just show you a few things. Now this, the main output voltage from the rectifier is running nearly 600 volts on this amp, so it's basically the same as what used to be called the Supergroup amp, and some of the early Marshalls ran at this high voltage, 600 volts. And also on the plates, on the grid 3 of the two EL34s, they were running at about 580 volts, which is really high for a valve that's supposed to be only 500 volts max. All the original capacitors and everything are running just fine at these voltages, but I should note that when you originally turn the amp on, if you've got the standby on as well, the voltage on the caps goes up, and this surge voltage is about 650 volts, which is that goes on to the EL34s as well. So I don't suggest that you ever put some cheap EL34s in this amp. In fact, I tried some JJs in here and switched it on, and the blue flash bang from those JJs, they just couldn't take it. A couple of Svetlanas, as used by Marshalls, I put them in, they worked. And these original Pinnacles, which could have been, which were made a long time ago, but were premium valves marked under the Pinnacle name, they're just working okay. We tested them. They're a bit down on the GM, but they handle the voltage no problem. Here's the voltage here, 545 volts. That's on grid 3 of these valves, with 470 ohm grid resistors on them. See them there. There's a 10 ohm. They provide you one 10 ohm resistor common to the cathodes on these EL34s. I don't know why they bothered to do that, because there's no bias adjustment. You've got 200k there running down to a 56k here, and a little capacitor. There's a diode to give you the negative. It's not adjustable at all, so unless it was just a quick test when they made the thing to make sure that it was not drawing excessive current. At the moment there's 690 millivolts across the 10 ohms, which means it's drawing nearly 70 milliamps, two EL34s combined, 35 milliamps each valve if it was split equally, and running at 540 on the grids, and I think it's running about 580 on the anodes. That's giving you a dissipation of about 20 watts per valve quiescent. Now I should note that when this amp was originally when it originally opened up and everything, the plates were running just with the 470 ohm resistors, and they were running at nearly nearly 560, 570 volts, and the current across the 10 ohms was 1 volt, meaning they were dissipating, the valves were dissipating 50 milliamps each at nearly getting on for 600 volts, which means that they were dissipating about 30 watts each. Well, they're supposed to be 25 watts max each, plus 8 watts on the grid 3s, but even so, I measured the temperature with the temperature thing here, and they were running over 200 degrees C. At the moment they're running a max of, that one's 165, this is 180. It's running, and that's with 30 milliamps per valve. How did I achieve that? Well, at the moment I made a mod. I've added an extra resistor, drop-in resistor, and the little smoothing caps. It's just temporary because I might take it back out again. It's not really changed the amp in any way. I've just had to move a wire off of the off of the 470s to put this little drop-in resistor in. I've tried a few different ones. To be honest, the sound without any resistor as supplied with the 560 odd volts on the grid 3 is very, very touch sensitive. Amazing sensitivity on the amp. But these EL34s, they won't last very long, and then if you want to keep burning valves, I mean good valves, if you put cheap valves in there, they won't last at all. As I tried with JJ's, you'd have to put some decent new stock Mullards or some really good valves in there and hope that they're not going to blow, because that sort of dissipation, the grids would probably give up first. So I'm limiting the grid. I've tried a few different resistors to keep the current down. I wanted to get about 35 milliamps per valve, which I am using a 2.2k resistor. The capacitors are probably not essential for smoothing. If I'm going to leave it in, I'll probably take the capacitors out and just run the 2k2 down to the 470 ohms. Anyway, it's not a master volume amp, so you get a bit of noise from the speakers when it's on, because the output stage is obviously connected like we're having the master up full, but it's not too bad considering. Anyway, it's very touch sensitive, everything's working. As I said, these Pinnacle valves, they could be even the original valves. I mean, Pinnacle from a long time ago, could have been the original valves. The Bremars are certainly original. They all tested okay, haven't been worn out. Circuit diagram I drew out just to see what it's like. So it's basically the same as a Supergroup. In fact, the transformers are huge. I would say there are possibly 100-watt transformers in this amp, but it's only been fitted with 2 tubes. Why they put the 2 tubes so close together is beyond me, because they need all the cooling they can get, and putting 2 together is just making them run hotter. There's no problem with space inside. They could have easily spaced them out a little bit. If you can see, with all these probes in the way, they could have easily moved one down that way a bit, so get a bit more cooling. They've got the grill on the cabinet above the EL34s, which lets the heat out, but it was never a good idea, because people used to stand their beers and that on top of the amps and knock them over, and it used to run in through the grills. So generally most amps never had grills on the top. They would be much better than putting a decent grill on the back, which they haven't. It's all closed in on the back of the cabinet, which means that the air struggles to get out around these valves. When you're playing these valves flat out, they'll be dissipating about in this amp easily over the 25 watts per valve, so they're going to get pretty hot. I was testing it earlier, nothing else gets hot. The transformers don't get hot at all. They're not even working, hardly working, having to work at all. So that's the explanation for that little mod I've done at the moment. As I said, it does sound best without the mod. It's really, really touch sensitive, but the dissipation on the valves is too high. I've cut it at the moment to a sensible figure, and where it's stabilised. One valve's running slightly hotter than the other. These valves were on the tester tested the same, but it just goes to show when you ramp the voltages up, the actual current draw changes when you're running it over max. I mean, these are 500 volts max valves in the spec, and these are running nearly 600 volts on the anodes. Luckily they're good valves. You should have seen those JJs below with the blue flash, make you jump out of skin. So